trust in public institutions overall has gone down, and there's no question that higher education is part of that. I think one of the issues that we're facing and dealing with is being true to what our mission is and coming back to what we do best. We are an educational institution. We are not a political institution. We are not a social action institution. What we do at Dartmouth is educate the next leader. And so part of the work that I think we have to do as higher ed is to tell that story, make it affordable for folks across our country to be at our best institutions, and to talk about, and again, show the impact of what we do, not just in educating students, but in terms of American competitiveness and the research impact that we have on our country and the world.
Those are all terrific goals, but why is the public sour? Why is it soured on higher ed, do you think? I mean, are there 2 or 3 reasons that come to the top of your mind? Not Dartmouth per se, but I'm just talking about in general.
Yeah, I mean, in general, affordability is a huge issue. We want to make sure that students can go to great institutions and come out and take positions that aren't where they're not saddled with debt. That is certainly one. I think there is a perception that our institutions are ideologically homogeneous, and we have a real work to do to recenter our institutions. And again, going back to the central theme that I spoke about before, our mission has gotten more murky. We have to define our mission as education institutions. Dartmouth doesn't have a foreign policy. We are there to educate students. We are there to bring students with different perspectives from different stratospheres of income and bring them to learn how to think and have an impact. And we have not been clear about that, I think, across the sector, especially in recent years.
You mentioned the perception of ideological homogeneity. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think it is to a certain extent. Schools vary on that, but it's something that is so important to work on, both for our students and our faculty. And I believe, and as you know, I've talked a lot about this, we are not going to get to the best ideas, the best outcomes, unless we have people with different views at the table pushing at each other.
All right, let's dig into what you're doing at Dartmouth to try to address some of these issues. And recently you wrote in my newspaper an op-ed where you laid out something that you called Dartmouth's Principles of Institutional Restraint. This is coming off the Chicago Principle of Institutional Neutrality. Why don't you elaborate on what you're trying to do with that project and how it relates to the notion, and define for all of us what institutional neutrality is?
So institutional neutrality, or restraint as we call it, again, is the idea that a university should be a place where you can have different views and opinions at the table, and you want to encourage that freedom of expression. It's harder to do that when the institutional takes a particular side, because it essentially quells dialogue on one side of the issue. And so what Dartmouth reaffirmed, largely based on Chicago and the Chicago Principles, and before that, the Calvin Report at Chicago, is this idea that the institution is supposed to be, as the Calvin Report talks about, the sponsor of critics, not critics themselves. And this goes back to the notion that I talked about, that you want people with different perspectives feeling comfortable to voice their opinions, and it's certainly hard to do that if an institution is taking a political perspective on something where there are different voices on either side. Now, what I think is so important about what Dartmouth did is that it's not just about the institution, what I say are right, but our principles of restraint, which were developed by a faculty committee and endorsed by our faculty council, really goes down to the departments and academic units as well. Because you want students to want to major in different departments, to see different areas, and not be turned off because a particular department has an endorsed in a view. And you want faculty within that department to feel like they can speak their mind. And so the whole idea here is opening up the aperture for individuals and our faculty experts, our students, to speak their minds on campus.